as a kid, I was always the annoying kid who asked too many questions. But I think we all were born with that, and we quickly lose it in adulthood because
Yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
it's quite maybe embarrassing or scary to continually or annoying to ask questions
Yeah,
all the
very
time.
annoying. I know from my own experience, my two kids, that phase they go through where they ask why continually.
Yeah.
I was so pleased when they passed that phase, and now they couldn't care less.
Hello, and welcome to Book Club with the Italian Wine Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Hough, and I'm delighted that you're joining us as we get between the vines with some of the best wine writing out there. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and enjoy the show with the Italian Wine Podcast.
This month, our guest is Sunny Hodge, the author of The Cynic's Guide to Wine, published by the Académie du Vin Library in June 2025. Hi, Sunny. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on the Italian Wine Podcast. And a massive congratulations on your new book. As a blind optimist myself, I'm really looking forward to hearing all about it.
Thank you, Richard, for having me. It's a real pleasure, and I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Great. So before we get started on this book that you've just published, I want to take you back a little bit to the beginning, if you like, of your interest in wine. You completed a degree in mechanical engineering before embarking on a career in hospitality. And your career in hospitality then took you from Nando's to Margot, one of London's most prestigious Italian restaurants. So what first got you into wine? Was it strictly professional, or was a glass of wine something that you enjoyed on a personal level as well?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'd worked in hospitality for a long, long time, from casual dining all the way up to Margot, which was, a really fancy setup, beautiful service, incredible food, and a destination spot for celebs and things like that. So all through that journey, as a manager within restaurants, you have to be largely an amazing jack of all trades. So not only do you have to be able to fix anything that breaks down and understand your food product, service, standards, and drinks offering, the only way that you can really drive and develop your head bartenders and head somms is if you know their product to a level where you can actually direct and guide them. So you have to be good at everything all the time, I believe, as a good manager, which is really tough. And I think as I progressed within restaurants and then went out to consult and help on other restaurant openings, I felt that wine was very much my weakness. It was the thing that made little to no sense. And because of that, when it came to me opening my own spot, hospitality, my own hospitality venue in 2018, I was thinking, what's the problem that I feel that I can help in solving? And having been in hospitality for such a long time, it didn't make any sense to me that wine was still my weakness. I could sell the stuff. We were selling bottles of Sassicaia, big Bordeaux's quite easily at Margot. But it was just all through storytelling. And weirdly, the rest of hospitality, from cocktails to food to service to making rotas, it was all like understanding how stuff worked as opposed to storytelling. So wine, for that reason, just felt like a problem that needed to be fixed. And that was really what sparked my interest in wanting to understand it more. I opened Diogenes the Dog, which is my first wine bar in Elephant and Castle, London, in 2018, opening it with the understanding that the concept was to help consumers understand wine better technically. So no storytelling. The list was designed for no one to know the wines from that list, whether you're an expert or not. So we were getting in wines from Taiwan, Texas, India, China, Japan, Poland. We had a list that was designed to spark conversations rather than guests picking and choosing what they found on the list and then your sommelier going away and grabbing it. So I counterintuitively, the thing that got me into wine was the fact that it still didn't make any sense after such a long time.
That's very interesting, and also a lot of our listeners will be surprised to hear this concept of no storytelling, because storytelling really is one of the buzzwords around the wine industry at the moment in terms of being able to sell your wine. But you take a slightly different perspective on that, perhaps a more cynical perspective.
Yeah, I think the word cynical now means something very different to what it once did, and I would say that I use the term cynical as the original formation of the word, where it means just to question what we're told. And yeah, absolutely. Wine is largely marketed using storytelling. And I think that will never go away. And I think marketing in its purest sense is a form of storytelling. Like if you can't tell people what is so good about your product, then it's going to be really hard to sell your product. But equally, let's take the example of a car, for example. Yes, you can sell a Ferrari and tell everyone the story of Ferrari and how beautiful the thing is and the Italian craftsmanship, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're spending that much money on something, I think it's also valuable to understand the technical aspects of what's behind it.
Yeah,
some people will buy that Ferrari purely on the stories alone, and a huge sector of the market will buy it because they actually like cars and understand them technically and think that that's the reason that they want to buy it, because of the, I don't know, engine size or 0 to 60 miles per hour details. And I think within wine, not enough consumers understand the makeup and the technical aspects of wine, and most consumers are being sold wine on storytelling.
Yeah. So bearing in mind what you said about your definition of cynicism in terms of it being about questioning things, where does that come from? And does it apply, I guess not, but does it apply just to wine, or are you questioning, are you cynical in other areas of your life as well? You mentioned Diogenes the dog, the name of one of your bars, and they were the founders, or one of the founders of the philosophy of cynicism. Yeah, so that's obviously a key theme in your life and your work. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I think as a kid, I was always the annoying kid who asked too many questions. But I think we all were born with that, and we quickly lose it in adulthood, because sometimes it's quite maybe embarrassing or scary to continually or annoying to ask questions all the time.
Yeah, very annoying. I know from my own experience, my two kids, that phase they go through where they ask why continually. I was so pleased when they passed that phase, and now they couldn't care less.
I don't have kids yet, but weirdly, maybe I haven't lived it yet, but I'm really looking forward to that phase, because I think that is so important to us learning and understanding the world around us. And then I feel that as soon as you start to become an adult and you form your ego, you're actually protecting your ego from other people thinking, oh, this person doesn't know anything, why are they asking questions all the time? Or just in a social aspect of, you don't want to be the annoying person asking questions all the time. But those questions are really what help us understand like reality. So not only was I that annoying kid growing up, but engineering did not help at all. Because engineering is all about taking stuff apart, realizing, like, understanding how it works, and then putting it back together again, hopefully in a more efficient way. And the only way to take stuff apart and put it back together again in a better way is to understand why and how that thing works. So I think the duality of me being the annoying kid and then going on to do engineering really, really didn't help. And I do think it important to question what we're told, not in a conspiracy theory type of way, but, you know, if we are reading something in the news, or if we're told something in wine or food, I want to know I want to know why that is, because how else can I explain that to my guests? And I want to encourage my guests, my customers at the bars, to ask those questions, because otherwise they'll just walk away and forget the story rather than understand the thing that we've been talking
Yeah.
about.
Yes, and just to clarify, it is a wonderful phase in any child's life, but also extremely annoying that
Yes.
if you're watching a film or a television program and there's a constant stream of wine, it can test your patience as a tired parent.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're the founder and owner of these two wine bars in South London. I think both of them are located in South London. When you mentioned already, Diogenes the dog and Aspen and Mersal, is that?
That's it. Yeah, spot on. You've pronounced that well.
I struggled with that this morning, but I'm glad I got it near enough. So yeah, I mean these are obviously remarkable achievements for a young entrepreneur. And next time I'm in London, I'm definitely going to pass by. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, how would you define the wine scene in London, if that's not too generic a question? And more specifically, you're credited with promoting the first Taiwanese wine in London, and this is something that I think you're very conscious of bringing to the London wine scene, bringing wines from undiscovered or off the beaten track wine regions. So can you tell us a bit more about that aspect of your work? What wine regions are you currently interested in? What wine regions are currently exciting you? And what is the response when you introduce wines like this in London?
Yeah, so I guess to address your first question about the London wine scene, it's so big that I think it's impossible to like summate it, because there's so many different ends of the spectrum within the London wine scene. So I can meet someone who's working, I don't know, like in the Chinatown in the Dorchester, like Igor, who heads up their wine over there. And yes, it's a very niche, like fancy Chinese restaurant, but we're having two completely different conversations about wine. I work largely in the niche of weird and wonderful places and within natural wine, and none of those lists, maybe a couple of Chinese wines might appear on his list. And we work in the same field, but our customer base is completely different. And I think if I bumped into 10, 20 different people within wine in London, we'll all be doing completely different things, which from a customer perspective is incredible, right? Like it's so fun to have that element of choice, which is why I feel that London is somewhat the center of the world within the wine scene, because there's so much at your fingertips and you can go to different wine bars and experience completely different things and try completely different wines. There's a lot of people importing directly, which means that within the London wine scene, you have no shortage of new fun things to try and get into. So I think that would be my summation of the London wine scene, that it's expansive and it's hard to define because there's so many different people doing different things, which is the fun bit about it.
Sorry, just to clarify, did you say expensive or expansive?
Expansive.
Expansive, okay.
Yeah.
What about expensive? Is it expensive?
If we're comparing it globally, I would say yes, absolutely. And I think taxation is the primary driver of that. Duty, VAT. I've been a huge advocate for wanting to cut the rate of VAT for hospitality within the UK. It's an uncompetitive space because we're dealing with high labor costs to fulfill a service, high food costs to also fulfill that service. And when you're competing at the same rate of VAT to largely online service-led other industries, it's a brutal environment, you know. So yeah, I think wine and food is expensive.
Sorry to interrupt again. But I mean, it is interesting because we could probably talk about this topic all day. But I understand Margot, in fact, closed down quite recently as well as a consequence of these government policies, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely. They closed down really, really recently, which is a huge shame. But they are on a list of places that are closing down on a weekly basis, and places are still opening up, but not at the same rate. And I love food and drink, and I grew up in London loving the scene here, and I still love the scene here. But to do well, you need to be on it 24/7, and it's hard to do well within hospitality in London. You can't just fall into it and figure it out. So yeah, I think it's a shame, and I feel that yes, labor costs are increasing, but I think that's a positive thing because inflationary aspects have also been increasing. And yes, they feed onto each other as soon as minimum wage goes up, which I think is a positive thing for people to get paid more. But equally, then your direct food costs go up, and they sort of spur on each other to go up and up and up. But I think the way to fix hospitality in places like London and the UK is to compare the rate of value added tax to other industries that don't rely so heavily on VAT, and other industries that don't rely so heavily on high labor costs and high product costs to make a profit.
To come back to the Taiwanese wine, sorry, that was my fault for taking us in that direction. But,
yeah. No, that's all good. That's all good. So yeah, well, your question was like, what interests me wine wise from weird and quirky up and coming regions?
Yeah, and what is your response to things like Taiwanese wine?
So the reason that I outwardly look for these quirky regions is, as I touched on earlier, is purely to fulfill the concept of Diogenes the dog, the wine bar. So the only way to have honest, open conversations on wine in a hospitality setting is, number one, you need to open the gate consistently to having that chat. If you have a wine list that everybody knows, like let's say there's a bottle of champagne on there or Prosecco, your customer will come in, say, can I have a bottle of Prosecco? And then your sommelier, who's trained to the eyeballs, will then just go open the bottle at the table, reel off like a 5-second spiel about the wine, and then there's actually no interaction. It's like a very mechanical process. And what I want to do is have a list that no one knows, so it engages people in using the som who has all that knowledge, which means that I have the tough job of going out there and finding wines that no one knows. Taiwanese wine easily fits that concept. Chinese wine largely fits that concept. And I've just come back from China a few days ago as I was judging with the IWSC over there. So it was a really fun opportunity, having sold lots of Chinese wine in the past, to get out there and see what the scene's like. Texan wine, we've been selling for 8 years now, and I don't think anyone else is selling Texan wine in the UK currently. But the whole purpose of selling these wines is to build this conversation immediately at the table. And not only that, but also to bypass a lot of the ego, which is normal in customers coming in, believing they know about, let's say, Italian wines or German wines or Barolos, like the back of their hand. And as soon as you're coming in thinking that you know a lot about wine or a lot about Barolo, then you actually dismiss what your sommelier says, because what you're trying to do with each other is prove to each other that you know about wine. And the conversation that I want to have at the table is one of learning, not one of, let's say, peacocking about how much we know about wine. I guess when you have a list that is only comprised of weird and wonderful, quirky places, you actually don't have a choice to choose something else. So you have to engage with those wines and you have to engage in those conversations. I found largely Asian wines, and this is something I wrote about recently about this Chinese trip, Asian wines are received with the most skepticism.
Yeah.
So the wines, and maybe this is sort of putting all Asian wines into the same basket, because I actually don't think Japanese wines suffers from this issue. But the wines that we've had from India, Taiwan, China receive the most amount of, oh, I don't know if that's going to be any good before they've even committed to trying it. So I think Asian wines minus Japanese wine comes with this sort of innate bias behind them before people have even tried it. And I believe that's because those countries, India, China, Taiwan, their industries are most associated with mass-produced, low-quality, low-price goods. So when someone comes to tasting their wine, they assume that they're going to be made in the same way. The best way to approach that from a service perspective is to ask someone what type of wines they like, get them that type of wine, but don't tell them what it is. And then once you've got the buy-in of, oh, we both agree that you like this, then you tell them what it is. And if it happens to be a wine from China, then you've already got the buy-in. They've already committed to saying that they like that thing, and then it's too late for them to apply the bias that they might have on that country or on that style of wine, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that it can and has affected Italian wine as well. Also, that innate bias. If you consider wines like Lambrusco, which had a tarnished reputation from the mass-produced Lambrusco that was being made in the 1980s, and even Beaujolais, places like that. So it can be a real struggle for places like that. Once the brand or the reputation has been tarnished, it can take many years to really recover that.
Absolutely. But as we both know, like, making sweeping assumptions on the country that a wine is from, knowing that there are so many different producers, there are so many different ways to make wine, and there's so many different grapes and varietals that are coming from those regions, that it really makes no sense to make sweeping assumptions, because you can essentially you have the potential to make many or any style of wine from most countries.
Yeah. What about your relationship with natural wine? I know that Aspen and Moorsalt is London's leading natural wine bar. So what's the thinking behind that? Is that a similar kind of idea that you want
absolutely.
to create conversations or provoke interest or take people out of their comfort
so
zone?
After 3 to 4 years of operating Diogenes, I think it was time for me to create another concept and add another layer of difficulty to it. The decision around the second site made total sense because Diogenes was doing really well. Yes, the pandemic threw a spanner in the works, but equally, it was a destination spot, even whilst we were open as a shop during the pandemic. So it would have been an easy decision to open up a second Diogenes the Dog somewhere else. But then I think I wouldn't have challenged my team so much because the wines would be much the same. And I know that I had members of the team that wanted to learn more about classic wines. If you're working with me for 5-10 years and all you work in is the weird and the wonderful, then you actually miss out a whole bunch of learning when it comes to learning about more classic regions. So I think to add the layer of complexity and add to the learning for the team, opening Aspen and Merceau as a natural wine bar made complete sense, because then you're exposing your team to understanding classic wines. I guess it extends the longevity of your staff retention, because they've got more stuff to learn about and more ways to develop. But equally, natural wine conversations in their purest form are very technical farming and production conversations. And you rarely have those conversations when it comes to learning about classic regions or non-natural wines. Weirdly, when you're talking natural wine, you're talking about the technical stuff that Diogenes was always talking about, but just in the reference of farming and production. So that made complete sense for me to open up Aspen and Merceau as a natural wine bar. And I think from a moral perspective, I feel that the way we farm now is absolutely not sustainable. So it does make sense for us to change the conversation away from understanding more technical bits about wine into understanding more technical bits about farming and production of food and drink in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's another topic that we could probably spend all day talking about. And there is, of course, also a degree of cynicism around natural wine and what natural wine means. And again, we can spend all day talking about that. But I'm conscious of time, and I want to get your thoughts on Italian wine. This is, after all, the Italian wine podcast. I understand you take your team to the Morosini winery in Puglia every year. Is that something that you continue to do? Is that what's the thinking behind that?
They just came back a couple of weeks ago. So we import wine from Morosini winery in Minervino Murge in Puglia. Sveva is the name of the lady who runs and farms, and it's her vineyard. She's farming regeneratively, and we not only import her wines, which are phenomenal. If anyone's in Puglia, it's a must check out. But we also buy some of her fruit and help her with the harvest, or as much as she allows us to help her with, and then bring in those wines as our house wines. So we essentially label them, but we help her with producing that as much as she's willing to let us help her. So every year we'll send out a couple of managers and a couple of more senior members of the team, and they alternate year on year. It's great learning for them, especially growing up in the city. You rarely see how people farm, how people make the product that you're selling. They come back like really rejuvenated, and also like understanding their product more.
Super knowledgeable.
It's a great experience, but also the fact that she's farming regeneratively, it means that she has to be very technical and scientific, and the team are already like in this technical and scientific mindset, because they're not allowed, they're not largely sort of reviewed on storytelling. They're reviewed on their technical understanding of the subject. So it worked. Like the fit is just perfect.
Excellent. And is that a unique relationship you have over there, or do you have other suppliers, relationships with other producers?
So we're in Italy. We're only bringing in from Sveva in Puglia currently, but we import for the bars, and we also have a wholesale arm. But it's really, really like trim. It's a tiny little setup, and it's a very, I guess what you would call like a boutique setup. If we're selling, Texan wine and Taiwanese and Indian wines to other bars and restaurants in the UK, we're not building an entire list for a setup. We're actually sort of polishing someone's already good list with quirky, interesting, well-made wines. So we only work with Sveva at Morosini from Italy, but we do occasionally take in from suppliers like small batches of Franciacorta or Barolo, or little bits that'll supplement the list, and then usually we'll sell out of those and move on, because the lists do change quite a lot. But I think as a whole with Italian wine, and especially being influenced by Sveva and what she's doing, most of my interest in Italian wine has been within the natural wine scene.
It's a really interesting relationship, and really admirable as well that you do something like that. You're investing in your staff, but you're also investing in this producer in Italy as well, and forging these really intimate relationships. It can only be good for the producer, but also your customers and clients as well. That your staff have that really direct and real, authentic relationship.
Yeah, it's win-win from every angle.
Yeah, and if you get a couple of days in Puglia out of it as well every year, then
yeah, I know. I feel that I actually don't think I've been for the last three or so years. For whatever reason, something has always come up. And also because I'm sending my senior members of both teams over, someone has to stay behind. And invariably that person is me.
Someone has to stay in.
Yeah, exactly. Invariably that person is me.
Yeah. Okay, great. I want to talk then about the book, obviously. So, The Cynic's Guide to Wine. Why this book? Why now? And who is the audience?
As we opened with, wine largely is sold via storytelling. And if you think of wine compared to many other products that are out there, we focus on where it's from, and even sometimes like tiny appellations more than any other product that's out there. And those appellations we can look at as brands because they have rules for production and farming, and you can't call them that thing unless they fit that appellation, which is essentially your brand. So because wine is such a heavily marketed good, and because wine has been sold at a premium before we even understood how it was made, before we even understood germ theory, for example, we were selling premium wines far before we understood that it was living yeast that did the process of fermentation. The way that we articulate ourselves around wine now is largely based on storytelling and marketing. And I don't think that language has changed. So now that we understand the science, it feels that wine hasn't properly caught up yet. And the way that we articulate ourselves around wine is still very, very similar to how we articulated ourselves around wine before we knew that living yeast did fermentation. So I think now, especially now the science is out there, now is the time for change. And now is the time that we should include people in the fold of working in wine from a hospitality perspective, from a journalist perspective, and even from a marketing perspective that dwells on an understanding of the subject, a technical and scientific understanding of the subject, rather than the storytelling. Because a lot of the time, the storytelling isn't technically accurate or in any way or form true to how the thing works. So I allude to like soil here and describing wines akin to their soil type and saying that they taste like certain things as a result. All of that storytelling around that subject, I would say would be completely false. And geologists would verify that as well. People like Alex Maltman would be the first person to debunk those type of remarks. So I think if we're going to see wine through and have a generation of people that understand it and want to drink it because of an understanding of the product in the same way that I related it to the Ferrari, rather than just being sold into the marketing of it, I think now is the time for change. So I wrote the book, number one, to put all of my research over the 8+ years of operating Diogenes the dog in one place so that I could remember it, because I started forgetting the bits that I researched, but also to have a real-time, current, I guess, go-to book for understanding how wine works in one place to read and actually learn from. Because when I wanted to learn about wine, all I got was storytelling and I couldn't make any sense or truth of it. If I had this book, I think I would have got into it and learned more quicker and understood it in a better way than I did when I was growing up in wine.
Excellent. And before we take a deeper dive into some of those issues that you mentioned around minerality and soil, tell us a bit more about the research process involved. You take this unapologetically scientific approach to writing and research, but what did that involve? I understand you scoured academic journals and attended university lectures across the UK.
Yeah. So it was a lot of looking up online journals, research papers, studies that had been made. The book is all referenced, so I had to put that all in place. Going to lectures on soil science or microbes, but none of this was wine related, because I think if I was to write a book on wine science that contained information that consumers largely didn't know, then it wouldn't make any sense for me to read all the wine bits that do exist. I had to look into areas of science that we knew already but hadn't crossed that bridge into wine. So it was a lot of academic research in that sense, and then making it useful and determining how useful is this practically for consumers or people working in the wine industry to know, because it's very easy to be thrown into the rabbit hole of research and finding genuinely interesting stuff, but then realizing it's actually not useful at all in application. So there was a lot of filtering of stuff that I didn't include in the book that I thought was just completely, not useful in practicality, and lots of stuff that was hugely useful where I was like, okay, now we can say that this thing that is widely marketed in wine, this comment, should not be said because of this.
What you're trying to do in some senses is to dispel some of the misconceptions that surround wine. Can you tell what in your opinion is the biggest misconception that you were able to dispel?
Yeah, I would say I wasn't, in my defense, I wasn't actively trying to dispel comments, but within the research, when you look into soil science is a great example because, and I think to answer your question, that's the one thing that I think is the biggest thing we should look into dispelling and changing in our commentary about wine. But when you start to understand how plants react with soil, and also the knock-on effect of how we farm and how that affects our soil and how that affects our plants, the more you learn, the more you realize that those types of comments that are made in wine around, let's say, Chablis having its mineral profile because of the Kimmeridgian soils, or wines that are farmed on volcanic soils having certain tastes, or let's say smokiness because they're farmed on volcanic soils. I think that the more you learn about soil, the more you realize that those things just aren't correct.
Yeah.
And I get that for a long time we didn't have the science, so maybe that was the easiest thing for us to relate to, because we can see the soil, and also from a very cynical marketing perspective, your soils are like an irreplaceable fingerprint. One plot of soil is going to be very different from the person next door. And it's very easy from a branding perspective to say that's the thing that makes you unique because it's the only thing that can't be reproduced. And I feel that because of that, that's why we've largely dwelled on soils within wine for such a long time. But I feel we need to untangle that and make sense of it. And I hope that's what the first two chapters of the book have done.
So are we saying that soils have no bearing on the resultant wine, or is it just that the impact is different to that which marketers have long told us?
Yeah, so I would say the impact it's very different from the way that wines are marketed. Soil has a huge impact on the vine, but it's not in an obviously linear way. So really, I guess simple example would be the acidity of soils. So if you have a soil that is a high acidity versus a low acidity, that would impact the nutrient solubility of those soils. So the acidity will affect what type of nutrients will be more readily available. And of course, those nutrients, in addition to add a layer of complexity, would be more abundant or less abundant based on whether you have, let's say, organic matter that's decaying there because they're full of nutrients. Or, of course, if you're fertilizing and adding synthetic or organic fertilizers to those soils, then you're adding more of those nutrients to the soil. So all of those things, let's say whether you're adding fertilizers, the acidity of your soil, or whether there's a lot of organic matter, they would all give you more fertility or different type of nutrient fertility for your vines. But whether that goes on to building specific flavors in wine is a completely different conversation. And that's where the linear nature of soils versus what happens in your wine completely falls apart. There are certain things that are in the soil that may directly affect your wine, but not necessarily in the way that they're talked about.
To move on to minerality, it's another one of those hot topics that's currently attracting a degree of cynicism in the wine world. what were your conclusions on the use of descriptors like minerality in wine?
So I think minerality has become a really, really popular term in tasting notes. I use the term minerality in tasting notes when I'm judging. But equally, I think when we look at language, or especially around flavors, what we're really doing is wanting to convey to the reader or whoever those tasting notes go to a sense of understanding of what that flavor is in that wine. So I'm not against using the descriptor minerality because I think it helps explain to someone what it is that you're tasting there. But I think we should be aware that the minerality that we're using as an adjective isn't an actual mineral that we're tasting that's found in the soils, nor is it a specific mineral that's found in that wine. So I think to want to debunk that and open that up a little bit more, I have a couple of readings from the book. Shall I go through this?
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Yeah.
On the topic of mineralities, let's first discuss what are minerals. So I'll do a little reading from. So this is from our first chapter on what are minerals. So minerals are made up of organized and symmetrical arrangements of ions bonded together. An ion is simply a single atom or group of atoms with a net positive or negative charge. It's this net charge which enables them to attract other ions like a magnet. A single three-dimensional arrangement of ions is referred to as a lattice. And if this lattice pattern grows and repeats itself in a regular fashion, it is in turn called a crystal or a crystalline structure. These are what we mean when we talk about minerals. Crystals come in many forms, and most are not sparkly or gem-like. Instead, they are dull, weirdly shaped lumps. To sum up, a crystal is made up of an ionic lattice structure, repeated. This crystal is referred to as a mineral in soil, viticulture, and farming parlances. So that, in essence, is our mineral. That's what determines our mineral. So those minerals are made up of ions, and your vines and all plants don't take up the entire mineral. They can't absorb the entire mineral or rock, which is made up of minerals. They can only take in the individual ions that the minerals are made up of, but largely the ones that stick to the surfaces of the rocks. So if your soil is made up of a specific type or largely made up of a specific type of mineral, then the nutrients that the vine is taking up are not necessarily the ones that are inside those rocks, but they might be the ones that are stuck to the outside, which is largely in the soil water as opposed to the rock itself. So I think that's step one in realizing that when you believe that you're tasting or describing that you're tasting minerality in a wine, that it's not actually the rocks or minerals that are in the soil that the vines are taking up in the first place. I think the second caveat I would say is that we can't taste minerals or metals. Like if you lick a rock or a coin, it has no taste. And the only mineral that we can taste are halide minerals, which are salts. And even then, it's just NaCl, the table salt that we can physically taste.
Yeah.
If you were to ask me what it is that may give that minerality in wine that we think that we're perceiving, I have another extract from a bit further on. Shall I read that out for you? Yeah. So this is a little further in the book when it talks about how wine is produced and how we can sort of tinker with our wines to produce specific smells and flavors. So this heads up. What the hell does sulfur smell like? So, sulfur dioxide gas characteristically carries a pungent metallic odor, often described as flinty or likened to the aroma of a freshly struck match. If high levels are added during production, it can carry through to your bottle of wine and may be perceived by very sensitive tasters. These smells may not be wholly unpleasant and wouldn't be classified as a wine fault. Wine tasting notes of minerality have of late proved very popular. Whereas decades ago this was rarely mentioned, it now features prominently in the description of many a white wine. From a scientific standpoint, the origins of this commonly diagnosed mineral smell are elusive. Like all aromas, it is made more volatile by the presence of heat. Tests have shown that sulfur-based aromas in wine, such as struck, match, and flint, are more prevalent in wines that are served warmer. When we discussed soil in earlier chapters, we concluded that most rocks don't smell. So what is it about struck flint that gives us that sulfuric smell? How are sulfur and flint connected? Flint is derived from chalk in a complex process that began in the chalk seas millions of years ago. We could spend a whole chapter on this, but to mitigate the risk of losing you, we'll speed up the explanation. Under very specific acidic conditions, silica replaces the calcium carbonate in chalk, grain by grain. Local underwater bacteria in the chalk sediment operate anaerobically and produce hydrogen sulfide that meets dissolved oxygen to form an acid and create flint. It's this hydrogen sulfide byproduct in the flint from the ancient microbes which, when struck with force, will ignite and oxidize to create these low-level flinty smells. That is the end of my reading. So that would essentially explain where these mineral associated smells may come from.
A minerality, flavour or smell. It's not necessarily saying that the wine contains those minerals. It's just our brain's way of processing what it is it's smelling, in the same way as if we said red cherries or mushroom smells. It's not like those items are in the wine. It's just that's how our brain perceives the wine to taste.
I would say to an extent, but more so in language, it's how we communicate what that thing that we're perceiving is to other people. So I would say the term minerality is less our brain saying, I smell a rock, but it's because we can't smell that rock or taste that rock because we've never tasted that before because we can't physically taste it. But it's our brain trying to communicate what that flavor is that we don't fully understand, and then extrapolate a little bit and tell other people that we think it's that thing, but it's not actually us smelling that thing. And I think a really good example is, which is completely untrendy now, but describing wines, which used to be done so quite a bit, as feminine or masculine. Like when we previously, because it's very uncool now, described wines as feminine or masculine, of course we weren't tasting the gender of the wine, but we were explaining to somebody else what characteristic that wine may fit into. And in minerality, in describing minerality, we're doing exactly the same thing. The wine, we're not tasting those minerals in the wine as much as we're not tasting the gender of the wine, but we're saying something that we're hoping someone else might pick up on and understand a little bit of what we're trying to get across.
That's a very good comparison. It's like slightly more politically correct way of describing wine, I suppose, to talk about the minerality rather than to talk about its masculinity or femininity.
Yeah.
I'm struck by the fact that you must lead two very different lives, because on the one hand you're involved in these really, hesitate to say it, but I can't think of another word, trendy wine bars in South London, and on the other hand you're engaged in some of these really geeky scientific questions about wine and the science behind wine. How do you equate those two very different aspects of your life or your personality even?
Yeah, I love it because I'm a restless individual.
Yeah.
For anyone who knows me well knows that I struggle to sit still for long periods of time, and I think whatever I'm interested in, I won't be able to do it for too long.
Hmm.
Which yeah. So I think with the diversity of what I do on a day to day basis, it fits in perfectly with my character. Equally, all of this geeky stuff in wine, I think like we don't talk about it on a consumer facing level. Number one, because largely the trade doesn't know about it. Now they do. The book is out there and it's doing pretty well and lots of people are reading it and giving good feedback because I feel that they should do because our wine qualifications don't really touch on the subject matter that this book does. But the fact that this knowledge it isn't widely accessible or wasn't largely accessible before the publication of this book is the reason why we're not talking about it more on the table or in wine shops or even in trade shows. So I think the reason it's classed as geeky is because it's not widely understood. But hopefully, in the next few years to come, it'll become more widely understood, and we'll have these conversations more and more to normalize them in wine parlance, as opposed to now, where they're on very much on the fringes of what we're talking about. And I feel that if we move away from the storytelling a little bit, or even if we just build a sector of wine where we can just talk about this geeky stuff at the table more often in places that are not just my two venues in London, but across the world, then it helps actually build wine knowledge from a consumer-facing angle, as opposed to just talking about stories all the time. I think that I have the good fortune of being customer-facing quite a lot, which really is quite grounding because if I discover something really interesting about terpenes, for example, and how they are used as chemical attractors in nature, and how plants and vines utilize them, and how they can actually come across as floral flavors in your wine. And if I find that really fun and interesting, and I think, oh, that would be great for the book, but then if I discuss it face to face with 10 guests who just come in for a glass of wine and none of them are interested, then it's a really good feedback system for
Yeah,
realizing.
I'm just thinking that could be a high risk strategy to employ in your bars. Like start
Yeah,
talking to your start talking to your guests about turbines and wines. But
yeah.
yeah, it could be.
Terpenes.
It could depend.
Yeah, so it's a really good filter for what
Yeah, absolutely.
consumers find interesting and what they don't find
Tell us a
interesting.
bit about the background to the book in terms of how you pitched it to Academy Divin, or how did the book come about, and any advice that you might have for aspiring wine writers who want to pitch a book or who are thinking about publishing.
Yeah, so this is the first proper book that I've published and had to pitch to people. Having
Mm,
a solid proposal and a structured proposal, which is essentially the document that you put together as a pitch deck to publishers. Having a really clear, detailed proposal is hyper important. But equally, as much as you think your book is good, you actually have to pitch that you're going to be able to sell the thing, because
mm,
a book for a publisher, that they just want a business model to know that it's going to sell. So I think focus as much on what you can do to ensure, especially if you're a first time author, what you can do to ensure that that book is going to sell is as important as how cool and interesting you think the book is going to be.
mm.
So I think that would be my first piece of advice is write a crazy on point proposal that covers it from a financial angle and says this is why my book is going to sell and this is how I'm going to get out there and sell the book and then actually do it. And of course, pick a topic that has legs and you think we'll be able to get out there. In my pitch to Academy Duvan, it was very personal because I had already put it out easily to 30 different publishers. I didn't have an agent, which was something that I wanted to do because I thought it would I would have a little bit more control over how the book sold if I didn't have an agent, and also it just sort of adds a middle person that I didn't feel was necessary. So there was an academic publisher who wanted to pick it up, but I didn't think that they had the avenues to sell that. And very often with academic books, like they're brilliant, but equally, who buys them?
Yeah.
And do you ever see them in a Waterstones or a bookshop near you? And then I met Hermione, who's the managing director of Académie du Vin, and she understood the risk in me and in the book, but equally was very excited about the potential of, I guess, making a positive change in wine and adding so much value in our conversation around wine. Yes, there's a lot of debunking in the book. Yes, it might step on a few people's toes, and yes, it could be seen as quite a somewhat aggressive approach to making a change in wine. But equally, if it's not done in this way, how else are we going to do it, and how long is that going to take? So I think Hermione, I walked away from my first meeting with Hermione thinking she's the one. Like, she gets what it is that I want to do, and she could help me do that. And equally, I think I would be able to help her in selling the book and helping her business. So yeah, that really, really clicked, and she's done an amazing job. I'm so thrilled to have found Académie du Vin and have her trust as well.
I'm sure Hermione will be listening, and she'll be delighted to hear that from
Oh.
Hi, Hermione, if you're listening.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I completely echo what you say about having this idea of who's going to buy your book or how you're going to sell it. I always think that in some ways writing the book is the easy part. Selling it or finding people who are willing to pay for it is a much harder proposition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, before we bring our conversation to a close, tell us about what you're reading for pleasure. You're someone who never sits still, but when you do have a few minutes to read for pleasure, what's on your bedside table?
It's going to sound really geeky and boring, but I, especially with the judging circuit, like if I happen to go to other countries, so having just come back from China, I printed off like 6 studies on Chinese wine and mycorrhizal networks, which are like the little underground fungal networks in Helan Mountains, which is where we went for pleasure, because I thought so. Usually, I end up reading research and studies on the regions within a wine context that I tend to be going to, which I guess is really not what you expected to hear. But I think as well, like having written the book and put it out there, like it's never ending. And all of those rabbit holes that I had to curtail from going down in the book, I genuinely want to know. And I think it's really fun for me, because then I can go to these places, learn everything about the wines, and also add value in sort of looking at it from a more academic and somewhat journalistic standpoint. So I end up reading lots of research papers and studies that have been made on regions that I'm going to go to or am currently in. So that's the boring answer.
It's not exactly reading for pleasure, but
yeah. Well, if you're learning, I think it's if you like learning, then
absolutely.
Then yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
And for my part, my dad's been visiting recently from Glasgow. He's been over in Verona, and he left me a copy of a book called Question 7 by Richard Flanagan, which blends memoir and history. It's a kind of fictionalized biography. I'm only partway through it, so I can't fully understand what it's actually about at the moment. But his dad was a Japanese POW, so it talks a lot about his relationship with his father, amongst other things. But there's a lot of kind of rabbit holes and little lines that you go down, which don't quite fully make sense at the moment. But I think he's going to pull all those threads together. But it's a really, really beautiful read, and short little nuggets, little chapters that are really delightfully written. So I'm looking forward to reading more of that when I get the chance.
Love it.
Where can we follow you, Sunny, and where can we get a copy of the book?
So you can, I think Instagram is probably the best channel, because if there's any new things coming up, my handle is Sunny Hodge Wine. Instagram's quite a new thing for me, so do follow and check out all the upcoming tastings and bar progressions, and I guess we're building the science of wine course, hoping for it to be a qualification soon. So if anyone's into geeking out beyond the book, then Instagram Sunny Hodge Wine is the way forward. In terms of purchasing the book, it's in bookshops. I think most Waterstones and W.H. Smiths stock it. Academy du Vin have their website where you can buy directly from them as well, and it's on the behemoth that is Amazon in the UK and the US currently.
And the Academy du Vin website is highly recommended. They've got some amazing wine books, so do take a look if you get the chance. We'll include links to all the books we've discussed today and to your Instagram account in our show notes. So please take a look below at our show notes. Sonny, thank you so much for being my guest today on Book Club, and I will come and knock on your door when I'm next in London, hopefully next summer, if not before.
You let me know.
Looking for some Taiwanese wine or something like that.
We won't disappoint you, Richard.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your company today. Until next time, ciao.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on Book Club with the Italian Wine Podcast. Tune in again next month when we'll get between the vines with another great wine book. Remember, our show notes, including full details of all the books we've discussed today, are available at italianwinepodcast.com or wherever you get them.